celebrating Black History Month, as Edison has done for so many years. It's very important to us. We have a number of events tonight that we're going to encapsulate into one. The first thing we're talking about is Lynching, Alabama. It's a reader's theater play written by native Alabamian, retired Edison State English professor Jane Kretschmann. Professor Kretschmann has done extensive research of lynchings in her own state of Alabama and wants the audience to know that her work is dedicated to the memory of Alabamians who were lynched and to the families and communities who suffered their loss. Professor Kretschmann will now read Safe in Alabama, 1965, in which she states that she was not safe from the racism and bigotry that has taken all of my life to try to overcome. So please welcome Jane Kretschmann.
Safe in Alabama, 1965. My aunt in Virginia called to ask whether it was safe for her family to drive down. Mama scoffed. Jane drives to Troy to college every day, John to work. There haven't been any marches from Helicon, no roads blocked. Don't believe all that stuff you see on television, outside agitators. Of course, it's safe here. Maybe Aunt Ruby should have asked safe for whom? Certainly not safe for Viola Lizzo, shot in her car, ferrying marchers between Selma and Montgomery. Not safe for Reverend James Reeb, attacked while walking down the street in Selma, dying 2 days later. Not safe for Jimmy Lee Jackson, beaten and shot by state troopers in Marion as he tried to protect his mother and grandfather. Of course, safe for Willie Brewster, murdered by white supremacists on his way home from work in Anniston. Or seminarian Jonathan Myrick Daniels, killed in Hayneville, shielding another activist from shotgun blasts. And I, who safely drove to college every day, was not safe from the racism and bigotry that is taking all of my life to try to overcome.
Jade, every time I hear that, it's a little better. I don't know if I'm paying attention more or it just gets better every time I hear it. So really appreciate that. So the next item we have is we will be showing a video that includes Billie Holiday singing Strange Fruit and a collection of historical photographs of lynchings. These photographs are very graphic in nature. So if you have young children or you wish to leave the theater, now is just for this portion. I'll give you a few minutes to do so because I don't want anybody to be upset. Just go ahead.
a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black body swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rock, for the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter cry.
Before Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Robertson, Cynthia Wesley were killed. Before Jimmy Lee Jackson, Reverend James Reed, Viola Luizzo were killed. Before Willie Brewster, Jonathan Myrick Daniels, Samuel Lehman Young Jr. were killed. Hundreds more were murdered in Alabama. Some shot, some burned, some beat, some drowned, most hanged, all have been lynched. One or two or three or four or five at a time. 2 unknown Negroes in Sylvan, 2 unknown Negroes in Georgiana, 4 unknown Negroes in Monroeville. Between 1870 and 1950, maybe 360. 29 in Jefferson County. Some white, most black, some women, most men. Sometimes a whole family with children. In places named Op, Reform, Pineapple, Duke, Inverness, Excel, Chestnut, Vinegar Bend, Whistler, Toadvine. Accused of testifying against a white man, poisoning mules, making unruly remarks, rape, attempted rape, murder, setting fires, refusing to run an errand for a white woman, wearing a military uniform in town, trying to prevent a lynching, protesting a lynching, scolding white children who were throwing rocks, paying attention to a white girl. Were accused of nothing. All lynched.
Oh, John, help me. I had the most awful nightmare, though I know it wasn't no nightmare at all. Lord, I wish it was. I dreamed I saw my little brother running. I tried to call him to come to me, but I couldn't make no sound. And he was trying to get away from this gang of white men who yelled, "We'll get you for what you did to that little girl." When they caught up with him, they cut off his scalp. Blood run down his head. It must have been a cork jar full. He looked right toward me, crying for help. Oh Lord, have mercy. When they cut into his stomach, his inwards spewed out all over the ground, piling up in purple mud. I wanted to go to him, to hold him in my arms, but my feet couldn't move. My poor brother was still alive, screaming and begging for his life. But they didn't care. I saw them hang him from this oak tree and shoot him 5 times. They smoked their cigars and drank their whiskey, and Andy hung there, bleeding to death.
My word. Mother, listen to this article from our Brooklyn Daily. There has been another lynching. It says, Monday night, masked white men visited the house of John Brown, a well-to-do Negro farmer near Childsburg, Alabama, and carried him off on the pretext that they were officers and had a warrant for his arrest. A well-to-do Negro. So they cannot even tolerate a black man bettering himself. And it gets worse. Today, Brown's body was found in a creek with a rope around his neck. He had been hanged from a bridge, and when dead, the body had been cut down and thrown in the water. How terrified he must have been, and how he must have suffered. I can hardly bear to think about it. No, the article does not say that Mr. Brown had committed any crime. It says only that he was a witness against 2 white men charged with burning a farm. I suppose that is crime enough in Alabama.
You better believe I'm fixing to light out from this place. And you would be too, if you had seen what I did. I was walking home when a couple miles outside of town, here comes this crowd of men in hoods dragging Alan Parker. I jumped in the bushes to watch, but I wish I'd never seen it. They threw a noose around Alan's neck, tossed it over a tree limb, and hauled him up. Poor guy was jerking and strangling. Even when I closed my eyes, I could hear him gagging. I've pleaded with Alan's sisters and brothers to leave too. They wouldn't be the first to figure out it's not safe to stay where a man can be tortured to death just for being accused of burning a gin house with some cotton in it. I know. I'm leaving all that I got here, but the rent is awful steep and my pay ain't nearly enough to live on. But mostly, I'm too scared to stay. There's just no end to these killings. I'm headed west to get away.
It must have been something awful from the looks of all this blood. Like Hobbs was butchered. But you can't blame yourself. That mob tricked you into unlocking the outside door, claiming they had a prisoner. If you had tried to stop them, they would have shot you too, sheriff or not. Bunch of cowards to shove their rifles through the bars and gun down those prisoners all huddled in their cells. And you say their bodies continued to shake for 5 minutes? Bad enough to shoot 4 black men, but a woman too. I Swanee. I know they burned down the cotton gin, or at least that's what was charged. That's a bad thing, destroying a man's property and way of making a living. It ought to be punished. But why didn't those men take them out and hang them like others have done, if they were intent on revenge? Might have been more merciful. Sure wouldn't have been as much work. Go on upstairs. I will make our supper when I finish washing up all this mess. Blood takes a lot of scrubbing.
Hey Sam, come on in. Christmas gift? Y'all get a good Christmas? Sure enough, yep. Me and mine too. Missed y'all at the church pageant. Family's gone to see Luella's mom, so it's just me here tapping out a tune. You know how I like to try my hand at writing a bit of dance music? Guess you heard about that ruckus last week. Yep, that Seegers fella. He ravaged a sweet girl, couldn't been more than 12 or 13, and from a respectable family too. Soon as we heard, we grabbed up our rifles, caught up with him, and gave that old feller that special treatment. Put your feet up here on the stove and listen to what I'm writing. I like to call it the Ballad of Old Man Seegers. Mac attacked the little girl on a pretty day. He attacked that little girl but couldn't get away. He ran into the woods, he did, but couldn't get away. He tried hiding in them woods, but we caught him right away. Old Mac, he was a-begging for his life. Then we cut off both his hands, we used a real sharp axe. Then we cut off both his feet, it only took 2 whacks. Old Mac kept a-begging for his life. We hung old Mac to a limb which broke so he fell down. He was a-moaning and a-groaning and a-jerking on the ground. We doused him good with kerosene and set him all afire. We hung him back on that tree, this time only higher. Old Mac finally quit, a-begging for his life. So we shot him up and left him hanging. So we shot him up and left him hanging. Yeah, we did.
Oh, my soul, Josh. I pray our grandson didn't have nothing to do with that killing of that young white man. He tore through here 2 days ago as pale as homemade soap and looking like he'd seen a hang, saying, "Grandma Pearlie, I know I done wrong, but please, oh Jesus, give me some money so I can get away from here." With all that's gone on in these parts, I know he was scared for his life. I gave him what we had in the syrup can. You'd do the same if you were here. All anybody's talking about is that miserable sight they seen yesterday morning on the way to church. 2 boys and 3 girls tied up hanging from the trees alongside the church road, all bloated and covered with blowflies. Folks is saying they seen what looked like half the town headed up that way with torches long before sunup. I'm so glad our boy got away. Guilt or no. How many black folks has to die in the place of one white folk? I'm not saying he was right for him to die. Lord, no. His ma and pa are grieving now. But do you think there would have been a trial for our boy? He would have been hanging right there with all those pitiful others.
Dear Aunt Annie, the warden said I had to find some place to live, soon as Hal will get out of here in a couple months. I'm writing to ask you, please let me come live with you. I really don't think I should have been locked up anyhow, since all I'd done was love a man who loved me. What's the crime in that? How could I not love Andy Beard? He was hard-working and good. I never had a white boy be so sweet and kind to me. I'm sure Pa told you what he thought, but I want you to know the truth of the matter. Sure, I ran off with Andy, and that week we had together was the happiest of my life. But then we were caught, and it was horrible. Andy was trembling, scared, begging them to let us go. But then the posse held on to us, beating Andy so bad his head was pure blood. And then they shot him until he was dead. I begged them to kill me too, but they just laughed and slapped me to the ground. Back home, Pa and them beat me up good. Come fall, I was tried in court for being with a black man and brought here to serve 2 years in the pen. Please let me come. I think Pa will pay my way just to be shed of me. I'll be good and work awful hard to earn a living so as not to be a burden to you. Your niece, Lana.
Dear George, as I packed to move back to Tuskegee to begin our senior year there, it is with a heavy heart. There has been another lynching, this one near here. A most horrendous attack it was. John Lipsey, probably no more than 30, was dragged from his brother's house by a mob of armed men. The wife of a prominent businessman accused Lipsey of rape, but though he pled his innocence, he was immediately hanged from an oak tree until dead. Then the bloodthirsty men shot up his corpse. He was mutilated so badly, the shredded pieces of his body fell to the ground. Eventually the limb fell too, as if the tree itself could bear no more. Members of Lipsey's local family received death threats, and word is that some of his family and friends in Mississippi were lynched. There is no justice here. It's as our professor at Tuskegee says, accused of a crime, we don't get a fair trial. If we're lynched, our killers never get punished. I'm in a quandary about my future plans. When I graduate with a degree in teaching, I know I should come back to this area to better the lives of young Negroes, and I do feel a responsibility to help this community. At the same time, I fear for my own life if my views come to the attention of the local whites. I suppose I can only do as my dear grandma taught me. Pray for courage to live out what is right. Your friend, Samantha.
Good God Almighty, what they done to William last night. You know they was in jail on that damn trumped up charge of setting off dynamite at some man's house when everybody knows it was white men who had done it to make William look dangerous. Hell, what I hear is that a gang got him and lynched him in the woods. We know what that's all about. They can't stand the thought of us black coal miners having decent pay and safer minds so we won't all be killed in these miserable holes in the ground. Most of us blacks are made to work here because of our so-called crimes that the county arrested us for. You know it's so, even if it ain't. Now, William, he had the guts to speak up and fight to get us a union. That would help those shit-faced white miners too. They weren't too stupid to know it. But they can't stand to see us better just because our folks were slaves. So they crucified William Miller to keep us in our place as they see it. Well, we got to go help William's family now as much as we can and step in and try to keep those union efforts going.
Quick before the guard come by. Listen up and pass it on. Bush was tortured last night, tied to a stake, shot and burned alive. I know. Hush now, hush. Here he come. No, sir, ain't nothing the matter. Yes, sir, we keep working. Dumb bastard. The warden had Bush taken to the prison when it happened. You know how he went to get water yesterday, same as usual? Well, the farm wife said he beat her up. More than likely it was her. Her husband, when he found out she helped a black man get water. From there, well, the bring us convicts dying of thirst. You're right, Bush wouldn't hurt nobody. Been here at this hellhole of a camp for 9 years and not even one fight. Our best trustee, not making no trouble when we go out on gang. Working ourselves like slaves, making money for the country. Here he come back. Mighty warm day for fall, ain't it? Yes, sir, I shut up. When I heard that upwards of 400 come to see Bush burned, surprised they didn't bring supper to eat while they gawked.
I'm telling y'all, that half-wit Wilson Gardner like to scare us to death. Sally Mae and me had taken our kids down to the creek to get some rest from this August heat, when here he comes down the path just as if he had a right to be here. We figured he was up to no good the way he talked to himself and grinned at us. So we run to the nearest white men we seen and they took care of that creek. Last we heard, they were hauling him away for a good lesson. Maybe they warmed his feet a bit after they strung him up, or even stuck him into privates to warn them black men that might be looking our way. Now all us decent white women won't have to worry about being scared whenever we go out or even stay in our own houses alone.
Oh, come on, Dole. You know I can handle this story. Who else could find out what the Montgomery advertiser meant when it said the wire service got it all wrong? Well, we know that 3 Negroes were lynched, Jackson and Russell killed on the spot, and a 3rd guy got away but died later. Well, word is they might have poisoned some mules, maybe even burned down a barn. That doesn't seem like enough to execute 3 people over. Okay, calm down. I know we can't just come right out and say that in the paper, though I don't know why. We're supposed to print the truth, right? In any case, they hadn't been convicted of anything. They were out on bail and back at their home. Look, the AP said they were gagged so they couldn't scream. Then the mob of men shot them while they were tied up and threw their corpses in a ditch. No word about who made up the gang, only that they all wore masks, for sure. But maybe I could find out some names if I nose around enough, ask some questions, get some ideas to what would have caused the blacks to do what they did. At the very least, I could learn who the 3rd man was, write up an article about him dying. Hey, if the editor gets mad, just say you didn't know what I was up to. Word is the governor wants some answers, might even offer a reward. That'd be neat, huh? Me, this northern new guy at our little paper helping to solve the local crime.
Keep quiet, son. I know it's hot in this hayloft under the blanket, but you've got to spend the night here. You work for Mr. William Powell, so we gotta hide you until we can get you out from here. Who knows? They done took his brother and they could come for you. I heard they was a mob over there, 100 by the time they lynched those good young men from a tree. Oh, Lord, honey, get some sleep if you can. Your mom and me will stay with you for a little bit. Try to quiet. There's trembling in you. You gotta slow it down. Now just pray for some rest. Tomorrow when the crowd is gone, we'll hide you in the wagon and take you to your auntie's house. From there, you can go up north and join the army. I heard some white man got mad because Mr. Powell didn't give him as much road to pass as he wanted. Knowing the Powells, all they did was maybe take up for themselves. And now they're both dead. So, for heaven's sakes, don't you go sneaking out tonight to see where their poor bodies are hanging, all bloody from being shot and beaten. Sweet Jesus, we can't help them now.
No, sir, Mr. Cage. We won't be needing that fine suit. You give it to one of his friends to wear on that funeral day. I will keep this white shirt and these nice undergarments, though. You tell Miss Cage we will take good care of your son. So young. How old was he? 19, 20? You would think in my work I had seen everything. But this is the worst. Would you like to sit here for a little while and just get it off your chest? I know. The white paper said he escaped the lynch mob, but we have your poor son right here all cut into pieces to prove they's alive. Oh, Lord God, what kind of a world we live in? When all it takes to get a young black man slaughtered is for a white woman to say he tried to assault her. No, you cry. You cry all you need, son. We all have a great deal of respect for you, for speaking out the way you're doing. Maybe some little bit of good can come from the folks in Tuscaloosa County just by knowing the truth.
Here is his uniform. We won and buried in it. He earned that. Oh Lord, do you think, oh Lord, to think he served in France to come home to this? Do the best you can. The way his body was so abused. Yes, thank you. A cheer would be good. Do you think they came after him because he was a veteran? A man like him should be honored, not shut down in the middle of town. Did you hear how they killed our son? This posse turned on their car lights and told him he had to run. Then they shot him in the back and hung him from a telephone pole. It is just not right for him to have to suffer so and die. You are telling the truth. There is no way on earth our Jack would have molested anyone. He was a brave man and respectful. Seems like every time a white woman cries foul, they come looking for a black man to lynch. Well, this is just fine. What the policy man said we could afford. We don't need no fancy casket. Just see. On Sunday, our church will be jam-packed. Jack was so well thought of.
Thank you, Brother Amos, for allowing me to speak about my friend and classmate as we buried him today. Otis was so smart. Our English teacher said he was the best student she had ever taught. And he was funny. He always made us feel better with jokes and silliness. But today, we are angry in our grief. We are angry because Otis was snatched from us in such a brutal way. In my own grief and anger, I wrote this poem, Sonnet in Memory of Otis Parham. If you are hearing this, then I will know that you love Otis Parham as much as I. At 16, he was much too young to die, especially for a crime he did not do. The mob heard a white man had been attacked, but could not find the guilty one they sought. So they seized Otis Parham, who ran and fought, declaring he knew nothing of the act. They beat him, kicked him, shot him in the back. He lay there in a ditch like trash thrown out, all because some white man told about being assaulted by someone who's black. This lynching was by men known far and wide, but from true punishment, they all will hide. Mama Parham, I love Otis like a brother, and don't know how I will go back to school for 2 more years, knowing he will never be there to graduate with me.
It's good seeing y'all tonight, as we are not celebrating Independence Day. For what do Black Americans have to celebrate when so many of us are persecuted? Yes, sister, I welcome that. Amen. Many of you do not know how I came to live in Boston, all the way from Alabama. That will become clear as I speak of what happened to my dear mother. Elizabeth Lawrence, a year ago, Mama was a gentle woman, getting on in years, but she told me that when a bunch of white kids pelted her with rocks, she got after them, telling them to behave. That night, murderers burst into her home, pulled her out in her nightgown, and lynched her. You're right to cry out, sisters and brothers, for I can hardly tell her story. I have nightmares of finding her hanging beside the road. I had to leave her there while I ran a mile to borrow a ladder to get her down. The men had burned down her house and shed. I tried to get justice for her murder, but instead, the sheriff alerted the men who came after me. I escaped with only my life and am grateful to these friends who gave me refuge. My poor mama's killers walking free to this very day. I fear that this rule of terror, these lynchings throughout Alabama and the whole South, will continue until we can vote to elect decent and fair authorities who will protect our rights and lives.
It was just so horrible what they done to my baby boy. He was with some friends, minding his own business, waiting outside a barber shop for a haircut. First thing we knew, the policeman was taking him off to jail for nothing. And when Jesse got away, that mob chased him down like a rabid dog, throwing rocks and bricks at him and shooting until Jesse collapsed. He was 26
and strong. You know your cousin Jesse was. But a body can only take so much. Then they threw him in a truck and drove off towards the swamp. We tried for days to find out where he was. But when we found him, he was miles away here on the bank of the Pachileji. My baby, poor body, has been picked at by buzzards. And for what? All they ever let on was that Jesse didn't say Mr. when he was talking about that policeman. Did anybody ever say Mr. Thornton when talking about my Jesse?
I appreciate your interest in writing a newspaper article about what happened to my daddy. I remember riding with him in his truck, hauling loads of scrap metal to sell, or cows to the stockyard, or milk to the big dairy. He was one hard-working man. Maybe he couldn't read or write, but he made sure us 7 kids went to school, behaved, and did our share of all the work. He was smart too, smart enough to run his own trucking company and filling station. Mama also helped out, selling fried chicken and greens and banana pudding every Sunday after church. If Daddy had a fault, it was awfully trusting. Even after that white man warned him he should leave town, saying he heard a talk of a plot against him. Daddy wouldn't hear of running. He was making an honest living. Didn't think he needed to run from white men who were still doing business with him. So, when a car off the road flagged him down in his truck, within walking distance of their store, he got out to help, reaching in his truck bed for his tools. That's when they shot him dead, blasting him in the back with a shotgun. Mama came running with a gun, but it was too late. Daddy was dead. Our family eventually lost almost everything my parents had worked so hard for. My uncles were afraid to take over the family businesses, and buzzards circled our store, lying, saying our daddy owed them money. Mama had no choice but to dole out their savings. Eventually, we just packed up and moved. I remember grown-ups and kids alike hid inside the bodies of my uncle's pickup truck, as if we were the ones at fault.
We were wrong. We advised blacks to walk circumspectly. We made no prescription for the outbreak of violence. We showed opposition to lynching in the abstract, indifference to the violence within our gates. We had an unfailing assumption that lynching victims were guilty of a crime. We propagated a worldview rooted in racism and the sickening myth of racial superiority. We called lynchings unfortunate, to be regretted. We dehumanized human beings. We did not let readers hear the black voices. We were concerned with ways the legal system could move the accused to the scaffold faster. We saw alleged northern media bias as a greater problem than mob killing. We said that in no cases were mobs made up of what would be called the best citizens. We take responsibility for our proliferation of a false narrative. We regret our treatment of African Americans in those disgraceful days. We didn't take the time to learn who the victims of lynching were and tell their stories. We take responsibility for our predecessors' negligence and callousness in news and editorials. We took an approach that foreshadowed our later failures in covering the civil rights movement. We must never be as wrong as this again.
Please join me in applauding even more. Now, I know at this point we have a little special presentation that almost no one knew about.
So Jane, these are for you, for your wonderful work, and what an honor it was for all of us to And of course, other kudos do go to Vivian for your wonderful directorial efforts in making all of this play shine so beautifully for us. So thank you.
So for right now.
Those people on the stage.
So if you look at your program, we're going to have an intermission. And we say an intermission, but we are going to absolutely be enthralled with Innovation Quartet playing jazz. Remember, there's food in the back. And then we will begin a little bit with the second part of the event tonight. Thank you. If we could have a round of applause for Don, who always does a fantastic job. He's just quietly hanging out in the back like he always does. And so it's always spectacular. The second part of our event tonight is really celebrating our essay winners. So I'd like to introduce Marva Archibald and Carl DeSantis. And so this is, I'll let them talk.
Thank you.
Marva's got the great hair, I got the great hat. I even asked her if she'd like to borrow it for a while and wear it. But once a veteran, always a veteran, and if you're a veteran here, it's typically what we do all the time. We appreciate that. But we have some veteran writers, at least one who's been in a contest writing before, and also some of our other essay writing here at Edison State. You're going to get to meet our winners of our American Dream Essay Contest that went on the past number of weeks leading up here to tonight. I want to recognize, too, we had judges who are here as well, and Eileen Thompson, back in there somewhere. There we go. And Larry, over there, holding down the ranks, who was in the play as well. Deborah Williamson, who was in the play as well. So we had some great judges, and one of the judges, Craig Gilbert, wasn't able to do this. But thank you to the judges who labored over each one of those submitted essays. Each one of them could have been a winner. So I'm going to ask our first place winner to come up here, Teresa Donnan. Teresa, there she comes. And a little, I guess we wouldn't call it a secret, she's about to become a grandma. like any minute now. But Teresa's going to share with us right up to the microphone there. Frederick Douglass, The American Dream.
Frederick Douglass was a self-educated chain breaker who walked the path of freedom to become an important part of American history. The way his eyes were opened to the injustice that was going on immensely changed slavery. In the book, Frederick Douglass, a precursor of liberation theology, written by Reginald Davis, it stated a very profound statement. He believed that the religious practices of this land served only one purpose: to keep the oppressor on top and make the oppressor more powerful. If they could keep convincing people that it was God's will, then the oppressors would always remain in complete control. Douglass knew that if his people remained uneducated, that they would never know any better. In the excerpt, Learning to Read, he attained the book, The Columbian Orator. The more times Douglass read the book, the more anger he would have poured towards the enslavers. When he thought of how malicious the slave owners were and how they would dehumanize their slaves, it lit a fire inside of Douglass. The Columbian Orator proved to be a pivotal point in his life. If he was ever going to make a difference, he needed to be free. Frederick Douglass not only freed himself from slavery, but he also helped pave the way for other slaves to find their freedom. Frederick Douglass started out with the worst of circumstances and became the epitome of a true American hero.
Okay. As long as I don't have to read it
Our second place winner, in fact, I'm looking at that flag. We did rehearse this part. The play got rehearsed very, very well. Serena, would you come up here? Serena tied for second place. MLK and American Dream. In the newspaper this past week, there was an article and it titled this entire evening American Dream. But I think you're going to leave tonight with some great ideas, especially from the play. Now the essay here, Serena Shepard, and MLK, the American Dream.
When you think about Black History Month, who or what comes to mind? Most people think of Martin Luther King Jr. and the rights that he fought to receive for the African American community. African Americans were not treated equally, and many were mistreated simply because of the color of their skin. There were many activists that fought for equal rights. While Martin Luther King Jr. is an important part of history, and his works for equality will never be forgotten, there are many others who also fought for the same cause, but sometimes go unnoticed. One of these individuals was named Mary Church Terrell. Mary lived from 1863 to 1954. She became an activist in 1892 at the young age of 29. Both of her parents were former slaves who became successful in their lives. Her father was a businessman and her mother was an owner of a hair salon. Mary went to college in Ohio to receive her bachelor's and later her master's degree to become a teacher. Mary's activism began when one of her old friends, Thomas Moss, was put to death because his business was competing with ones owned by a white man. She then started campaigns with other activists to help end the killings of African Americans. Mary may not be as well known as Martin Luther King Jr., but her and many other activists also helped to make equal rights for African Americans and ultimately made a difference in the world that we live in today.
Okay, continuing on our theme for the American Dream, and also tied for second place. Now this face is going to be very familiar because she was in the play this evening. Sarah Beck. Sarah, if you'd come on down, and Price is Right. She also won one of the places in the Peace Essay Contest that William Loudermilk has for us, and of course your record from the play. Again, Sarah Beck. And the second place tie with Serena Shepard.
The Oxford Dictionary describes the American dream as the ideal by which equality of opportunity is available to any American. Today, I would like to share with you the story of a woman who is the perfect definition of the American dream. Osceola McCarthy was born in 1908 in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. She lived with her grandmother and her aunt, who made a living by washing clothes by hand. In the 6th grade, when her aunt was hospitalized, Osceola dropped out of school and washed clothes full time. She would take the money she earned and stuff it into a doll carriage for safekeeping. She did this every day until the carriage was so full she needed to open a bank account. After years of hard work and modest living, Osceola retired at the age of 81 due to arthritis. No one would have believed that the little old laundry washer saved up $280,000. 10% went to the church, 10% went to her relatives, and 60% went to the University of Southern Mississippi, which, I might add, was a white-only school until the 1960s. Osceola said, "They used to not let colored people go here, and now they do, and I'll make sure of it." Osceola did not just give money. She inspired a community that still donates to this day in her name. To this day, $568,000 of scholarships have been awarded to 113 black students. No, Osceola did not just give money. She gave 113 black students an opportunity. In Osceola's own words, she said, "I can't do everything, but I can do something. And what I can do, I will do." And I think we can all do a little something to be a little more like Miss Osceola McCarthy. Thank you.
Sarah and Dr. Hines are having this photograph taken. I wanted to make reference to the inspiring teachers that have been involved in the lives of each of these students. This particular semester, Sarah wasn't in a necessary communication or English class, but she had Dr. Vivian Blevins in the past, so we think that we have some inspiration that came out of the past. Eileen Thompson was the inspiration for Teresa, and Brian Linegang had about 6 students enter this particular contest, and 2 of them placed in this as well. Okay, and finally, for 3rd place, Haley Tyson. Here she comes. Haley's essay is Fight for the American Dream, and again, she's a student of Professor Lange.
The American dream is something that many, now and throughout history, strive to achieve. However, many obstacles are faced by Black Americans. The 1950s marked the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, with Rosa Parks saying no to moving out of her seat on the bus. Later, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. followed by speaking on behalf of her and all Black people, and later Ruby Bridges made history by attending an all-white school. Before each of these important historical figures, there was Dr. John Stuart Rock. John S. Rock lived what many would consider the American dream, but it didn't come without lots of hard work, determination, and challenges. John S. Rock was born in 1825 to free parents in Salem, New Jersey. He attended public school and at the age of 19 became a grammar teacher. He continued teaching for 4 years and during this time studied medicine while assisting 2 doctors. In 1848, Rock applied to medical school but was rejected for his skin color. He focused his interests on dentistry and studied with a white doctor in Salem. He moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and opened a dental practice. After opening his practice, John Rock was admitted to the American Medical College and taught at a night school for African Americans. In 1852, he graduated medical school and married his wife, Catherine. John and Catherine moved to Boston, Massachusetts, where John opened his medical practice. In his practice, he offered free medical services to refugee slaves, and when he was not working, pushed for Black voting rights and abolishing slavery. John was forced to stop practicing medicine in 1859 after suffering from health problems, but his fight was not over. In 1861, Dr. John Rock was accepted to take the Massachusetts bar, making him one of the first African-American persons to do so. Later in the year, he was assigned the job of Justice of the Peace for Suffolk County, including Boston. He continued to voice his support for abolishing slavery while the Union and Confederacy fought in the Civil War. After the 13th Amendment was passed in 1865, Doctor and lawyer John Rock was the first Black person allowed to practice the law at the Supreme Court. Due to his health issues, though, he was unable to use his special honor to the extent he would have. In 1866, at the age of 41, Dr. John Stuart Rock passed away. Although he died at a young age, Dr. Rock was able to accomplish many things, including the titles of teacher, doctor, dentist, and lawyer. Each of his achievements came with a struggle, but he was successful in most of the things he put his mind to. The American dream stands on the premise that there is equal opportunity for everyone, allowing any goal to be achieved. While Dr. John was not given an equal opportunity to do everything, he pushed forward and was successful in many ways.
Can we give all the essay winners another round of applause?
Will you come forward, Lisa Judge? Who else is here? Deborah Williams, if you're here, please come forward. And also Eileen Thompson, if you're here, please come forward. We're going to get a group picture, please. Thank you. Yes.
Do you guys want to come?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. wrapping up tonight's event, we have one last thing. First of all, I want to thank everybody on behalf of the Diversity Committee, putting on such a great event, working so hard to organize everything, and on behalf of the essay winners, congratulations. It's always nice to see such professional writing at this point in their academic life. So we're going to wrap up. You'll notice on the back of your program, we actually have the lyrics to the song We Shall Overcome. And you don't have to be too worried because we also have them on screen. And so I'd like to wrap up by singing that. Thank you very